AI is the future. And if they don't have enough people internally, they're willing to train people.
AI friend or enemy?
Friend, it could become an enemy, right? I mean,
What's your take on the future of the mix of energy?
energy is in high demand right now. We do
Definitely.
not have enough. We do not have enough clean energy to meet, industrial targets and as also, clean energy targets. So we are, we're in an exciting place right now because
Any case study that you might be using or you might have implemented in Siemens Energy?
yeah, so currently I'm creating an agent for partnering, right? I have students who say, yeah, I use AI every day, every hour of every day, right? That I'm awake, right? Like that's great, but they're using it for like, what should I buy? Salami or pastrami, right? Like things that are not AI is not meant for, right?
Definitely. Use the nickname your team gave you.
Oh, the Terminator.
Really? Why?
Because
This is the Oil and Gas Breaking By show, where we are going to invite industry leaders to talk about their journeys and also technologies of tomorrow in an effort to break some of the biases that might have formed around this energy industry. Hello, everyone. I hope you're happy and healthy. I'm Ananja, and you are listening to the Oil and Gas Breaking By show. Today, I'm excited and happy because we will be joined by Jackson Montgomery, who's the head of emerging technologies and partnerships at Siemens Energy, where he is helping to shape the future of this energy industry. Jackson also wears multiple hats as a founder, entrepreneur, and college lecturer, while bringing unique blend of industry knowledge and the academic insights. With his background of working with Fortune 500 companies, he's passionate about innovation strategies and bringing new ideas to this traditional oil and gas industry. So with that, let's deep dive into his journey and also get his insight about the future of energy industry. Jackson, I'm really happy you can join us today so we can talk about these emerging technologies and how this industry is shaping around us. So, with that, welcome to the show.
thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And so we met, I will say, in a couple of weeks ago, and we start talking about the future of energy and also how the new technologies like AI is shaping the world around us.
Mhm.
So we have a lot to talk about this industry, but this show is not just about technology; it's also about you. And as I mentioned, you have multiple hats, and you you are working with Siemens Energy. You are heading their new technology group, and also you are a lecturer. So before we go into technology discussion, can you just walk us through about your personal and professional journey and any of the biases that you might have come across?
So what's weird is I didn't start in technology, right? My background is I grew up out west in the United States, where we jokingly say our nearest neighbor was the brown bear, right? Because you didn't have a lot of there wasn't a lot of opportunities to learn
Yes.
technology or computer science. It's something that I got into rather late in life, right? So in the college age, right, I was working as a radio host, and I was working in a couple of different I was in 35 different student organizations when I was in college, and got to do a lot of different things. Technology came to me after that in college when I was like, this is some really interesting things that are happening, and I went from there to working for a technology company. So I worked for Wipro, if you're familiar with Wipro.
Yes, I'm very much familiar. Like that's company from India.
Yes, yes, yes. So
Right.
I did their leadership development program when I came out of college. Enjoyed it. I did a stint in analyst relations. I did stints, and then I ended up working for the C-suite on special projects. So I was based in New York City, working for then CEO, doing strategic projects. Questions that were asked were like, "Hey, we have an issue with this. Can you help us?" Right? And then I was working with our artificial intelligence platform, and back in the day when it was a couple of guys in a back room answering queries, right? That was artificial intelligence. And so, I worked with the development of that. And before that, I had worked in sales and technology, right? So in operations. And so, I did a lot of work to then go in and get my graduate degrees, very, very much focused on technology. And then joined Siemens about 7 years ago doing technology consulting while also still teaching. So after I got my first graduate degree, I started teaching at the University of Georgia, where I taught emerging technology. I taught statistics and data analytics. I combined the two, and I taught a couple of different courses, right? Very much focused on technology for management, right? So I still do consulting now, where I advise investment firms on a variety of different technologies, such as artificial intelligence, robotics, and other things that I have become an expert on in over the past several years. So
I can
that's a brief
imagine.
background.
But I can imagine, like you have started and working on AI. I think almost 15 years ago, if not mistaken, correct?
Yeah, a little over 15 years ago,
Yeah,
I'll
a
full-time
little over 15, and that time, I think those are the early days of
Yeah.
this technology. And now every second person is talking about AI these days.
Yes. Well, AI has been around as a concept for decades. The
Yes,
thing
I know.
is that no one is really like it wasn't in the mainstream until very recently with generative AI, right? And what OpenAI is doing with ChatGPT and Microsoft and Amazon, all of the hyperscalers really investing in it. I mean, you saw at the event that we were at when we met a couple weeks ago.
Yes.
Everybody was talking about AI and they were talking about data centers, right? Like that's what everyone wants to talk about in energy right now.
Definitely, definitely. So we will talk more about it, but I'm coming back to your journey. So as you said, like you have started in the west of US, and you didn't have that exposure of technology. So how you get connected with the technology, and how did you shape your career?
Yeah, so college, right, is where I started to get some understanding of where I thought technology would be. I really loved I don't know if you ever watched the show BattleBots, right? Years and years ago when they had the robotic platforms fighting against each other. That was kind of like my first foray into, hey, well, robotics seems kind of cool. And so I had learned from there I started learning in college all the different elements of coding and because I wanted to see, hey, could I build a robot like
Yes.
this? Or hey, could I understand how the robot thinks and works, right? So that's how I started in college and then worked for multiple technology companies, right? Where I was working from a business function most of the time, but from those business functions, I got access to, and I always tell people that I serve currently, and I've always served throughout my career as this person who can speak the technical speak of the programmers and the DevOps teams. And then I can also speak the business speak, right? Which there's not a lot of us who can do that, right? You tend to either be one or
Definitely.
the other.
Because we work in silos, like we always talk about, correct? Like we have
Yes.
a lots of knowledge, but there are very few people who can connect the dots. Yeah, like
Yes.
from the technology and what consumer needs and what business can deliver.
Yep. And I was just giving, so I gave a keynote address a couple weeks ago, at an event, and we were talking about AI and supply chain, right? And it's great to now see how many people are starting to become more competent in when it comes to artificial intelligence and technology in general, right? I mean, we've always been, as I'm sure you've seen around my age, right? Like the times go where we've picked up things like PowerPoint and things like that,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
basic
yes.
business processes, to now see people using RPA and other elements of artificial intelligence and starting to apply it to everyday work. That's exciting stuff. And that's something I've been doing for years, but now it seems to be becoming a lot more mainstream.
And that might be making you more excited about the future.
It absolutely is, right? So I teach a future studies course, right? So that future studies course, we look at, well, what will the future hold in 10, 15, 20 years? Because I primarily teach MBA students, and MBAs are constantly looking at, well, they're, in their late 20s, the mid 20s to late 20s, to early to mid 30s is primarily a lot of them are. And that's really where I think, they're looking 15, 20 years, they'll still be managers in their businesses. 15, 20 years, there's a lot of changes that are going to happen, as you're probably aware.
And definitely, I can imagine. So how you are juggling across your diverse roles? Like one side you are working with the one giant, like Siemens Energy, and one side you are a lecturer who is talking about these technologies.
Yes. And then, I do consulting and then I have a startup as well. So, right. So I
Do you live in this world like where we all have 24 hours?
well, I think the best way to look at it is I have an amazing spouse who is if she wasn't there, because I have also have 3 young kids. So if I didn't have her, I would not have I'd be able to do everything I do, right? So
Yes,
I know it's kind of a comment that I'm sure men like us talk about all the time, but I think it's really important to note, right? Is that our partner, whoever they may end up being, is really important to the ultimate success, and
definitely,
they're not given enough credit, I think, because my
definitely. The
wife
support
definitely
is needed.
deserves it all. Yes.
Definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
Without support, you cannot do much. But also, like we talked about some of the stereotype and bias that you came across, like when you change your industry, like you started with the Wipro that is more on software based, and now you're working
Yes.
with the Siemens Energy, which is more hardware based, correct? Like more bigger stuff like turbines, compressors, and
Uh-huh.
all those things. So did you face any other biases, maybe the stereotypes or something, maybe within you? Like I'm not just saying like how people look on you, but did you feel any kind of challenge when you try to do multiple things, and also when you
Absolutely.
change your industry?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, I think so a lot of MBAs, right? A lot of my students, right, end up being, switching careers or even entire industries, right? And I try to teach them from my own knowledge, but from also mentoring dozens of students, right? And what I've seen. And I could tell you there's definitely learning curves, right? But the important thing is you have to be willing to learn. And so I think even if you switch mid-career, right, like some people do, or if you switch to a different industry, you have to be willing to learn and you have to push yourself to learn because especially in an industrial environment like Siemens Energy is, as someone who didn't come necessarily from industry, I'm not an engineer, right? I'm a
Yes.
self-taught engineer. That's what I say. And there's a lot of things you have to learn because otherwise it's just assumed that you know these things, right?
Definitely. Definitely. And I believe like you must have gone through the same cycle of self-doubt, correct? Like when you make those big decisions.
What's helped is the consulting side, right? So, Siemens Energy knows everything I do, right? There's no secret like me starting a business and they don't know about. And I tell them and they're supportive of the fact that everything that I do actually helps me in my career, right? Helps I
Definitely.
bring that. So the
Yes.
knowledge I get from academia, the knowledge I get from consulting, the knowledge I get from startups, right? All of that I apply to my day job as I say it, right?
Definitely.
And it's really helped because I consult in every industry, right? There's not a single industry that I have not consulted in because in the end, especially with technology, the use cases can be very similar. Every industry has finance department. Every industry has, departments for, supply chain, right? All of these are very important. And so I learn from each of those and I can bring that to my knowledge that I have at Siemens Energy.
But that also helps you to think outside the box. Like most of the time, as we started, like we live in that world, and then we don't know what else is happening outside. So especially in your role, when you're touching different points or meeting different people outside your industry, that definitely brings a new perspective.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you and I connected. I'm naturally an extrovert, right? So I think you and I also connected because we so but that helps, right? Because
Yes.
I started my career in sales, right? I started in technology sales and operations, and because of that, I can connect with anybody. It doesn't matter, what their race is, their sexuality, right? All of that stuff doesn't matter in the end because you could find a connection with somebody, and that's the most important element of any business relationship.
Makes sense. Like in previous episodes, we talk about the importance of mentorship and networking. Do you want to share your experience on this topic?
Sure. So, like I mentioned, I've mentored dozens of students, right? And some of them are older than me or of my same age, right? Because I'm only in my 30s, right? And I can tell you that it's been great, right? I think every leader who is worth their salt will tell you that they learn more from mentoring others
Mhm.
than from day-to-day activities in business. Because in the end, you want to provide value to the person you're mentoring. And so you get yourself to learn and to focus on what could be good for them. And then you find out learning and they teach you. Right. And so I consider important part of being an academic is mentoring. So any student, I say, hey, I'm here after hours. If you want to talk, I connect with them, especially when they're planning their careers, their next steps. Because especially in like the professional MBA program or executive MBA programs, you have these people are working already, right? So they're
Yes, you're
working
right.
professionals.
Yes.
You're probably familiar, right? They're
Yes.
working professionals, and half of them choose a different role about halfway through the program. So within a year, they have a different role, either inside their company or in another company, and the
Yes.
other half change after that
And
after
that,
they
that's
get their
that's the
MBA.
ambition of those MBAs.
Yeah, that's the ambition of MBAs, right? But there's a lot of uncertainty. I mean, I've mentored people from every industry, right? Because in the end, a lot of it is about confidence. And you can help someone be more confident and knowledgeable about who they are and what they can offer a business.
Definitely. And also you mentioned about the networking, like how that helped or shaped your career.
Yeah. So, well, I want to mention one other thing about mentorship too. So, I started a group actually internally inside of Siemens Energy. It's called
Mhm.
Spark Leadership because energy company Spark Leadership, right? Yes.
Exactly
Yes.
right. Yeah.
Yes. And it's young professionals with like
Correct.
5 to 10 years experience, right? Because we found that that was missing in the mentorship levels inside of our company. So, the Spark Leadership group really it's for them to learn from each other, right? So, we
Mhm.
meet bi-weekly where they talk about, hey, this is what I do inside the company because we're 110,000 plus
Mhm.
people.
Mhm.
This is what I do. These are things I'm looking at, and they share and they get to know each other. And so it's peer mentoring, which I
Yes, right.
think is something that's also missing, right? Because I had so many requests for mentorship. I said, look, you guys need to learn from each other. I'll be in the meeting. You can ask me questions, and we can still have one-on-ones. But this is really going to provide value. And I bring leaders into those meetings, and then they have the HR professionals to talk about positions inside the company. So that's one thing that I do internally inside of Siemens Energy. But
And that's
please,
great. And also is a cross-dimensional knowledge enhancement, I will say, because
absolutely,
some of the time, like you are doing one work, you doesn't know what's happening outside the work and responsibility that you have. But I think these kind of platforms helps to meet you outside your work and also learn from them and also explore some of your career opportunities as needed.
absolutely.
That's great. So let's keep this discussion going because you are serving this energy industry really close. How this industry is transforming, where this industry is going towards.
So this is interesting, right? I've had, and I've told my boss about this, so he knows. I've had multiple invites for other jobs, right? So people have been trying to recruit me basically out of
Yeah.
Siemens Energy, and I tell them, I say, look, I really love the industry that I'm in, right? I mean, we're in the
Yes.
same industry, right? It's such an exciting time. So what I'm doing, right, in emerging technologies and partnerships is I'm forming partnerships with companies that are forming the energy future.
Mhm.
Right. So whether it be, nuclear fusion or fission companies, right? We just had
Yes.
these are two public announcements, right? So we just
Yeah.
made an investment in Marvel Fusion, right? So it's a big laser fusion focused company. We also are had made a announcement that we connected with Rolls Royce and
Mhm.
are providing them technologies for SMRs, right? So for nuclear fission, and we're looking at all these other types of technologies right now because in the end, in the conference that we were both at, all of these companies are really energy is in high demand right now. We do
Definitely.
not have enough. We do not have enough clean energy to meet industrial targets and as also clean energy targets. So we're in an exciting place right now because there's so much that can be done. There's so much innovation happening, and it's just fun to be part of it.
So, what's your take on the future of the mix of energy? Like energy mix, like just to put it in the simple words, because in the past it was more about oil and gas based, correct?
Yep.
But you already gave some examples. But how do you see how the future will evolve?
Yeah, so I wrote a white paper a couple of years ago called Energy 4.0. And in that white paper, I talked about the future of energy, right? And where it would be. And the way that I looked at it is you have to look at it from short, medium, and long term energy futures, right? So in the short term, what we're seeing is a lot of renewables being added to the grid, right? A lot of grid innovations happening, battery storage, things like that. And that's great, right? Because right now it's a stopgap measure until we have firm growth, right? In the midterm, what we're seeing is new energy technologies, things that we had not thought of before or were working on for decades, like nuclear fusion coming out, right? And
Mhm.
nuclear fusion, the promise is that, if for the listeners who aren't familiar with the concept, right, is basically limitless, as they describe it, clean energy, right? It's not like nuclear fission. They call it a nuclear fusion reactor. It's not really even a reactor, right? Like it's not generating a lot of nuclear waste like what fission does. And so the idea is that you could roll these out and produce more energy than you're putting in, right? So the idea is that it could be exponential growth of fusion technologies. So that's exciting stuff, as well as new types of renewable energy like hydrogen. There's a lot of hydrogen development, a lot of battery storage development,
Yes.
lots of new batteries that are coming out. So being able to take waste heat energy or other things and produce energy from that. So more renewable gases. So that's kind of the midterm is we're getting, really effective at that and producing that or mining it from the ground, like with white hydrogen you can look up all the different types of hydrogen. The
Makes sense.
listeners, I'm sure you're aware, blue, green,
I
white,
know.
like
It's a
everyone
rainbow.
talks about these.
It's a rainbow.
Yeah, it's a rainbow of hydrogen, but
It's a rainbow hydrogen.
a lot of people are excited about hydrogen and what the future lies there. And then making fission, right? So like in the short term, again, making things more effective, right? So SMRs, small modular reactors, right? Making those more efficient and safer and more deployable because in the past, nuclear fission has taken a long time to roll out and it's been a little bit less safe, right? So those things are what we're seeing in the short term is development of current technologies. Midterm, we're seeing those technologies really starting to, new technologies being added to the grid. And in the long term, I think those new technologies are going to be the primary energy sources for the grid.
Definitely. One thing we also talked about in the past about geothermal. Geothermal is also going to play a big part, and that is coming from oil and gas industry, and it's nothing new for them. I think
Yes. Yes.
it's just extension of that same technology.
Geothermal, carbon capture, things that that are the buzzwords that everyone talks about, right? At these things, but the reason they're buzzwords is because they're effective, right?
Definitely.
And if you look at it from a perspective of the heat, heat from the earth is constant, right? It's it's not going away, at least
Yeah.
hopefully anytime soon. So the fact that if you could, find a way to effectively control
Use
that
that.
and
Yes.
spin a turbine or something like that, again, that's limitless energy because it's something that is renewable, but also, constant, right? So that constant energy flow. And in the end, it's going to be a mix, right? It's not one of these, at least in the short to midterm, are going to be the ultimate provider of solutions, which is what we've been seeing over the past decade plus is, wind power and all of these other things are being added to the grid to satiate the demand for energy. And that's going to continue for the next decade plus. Then we're going to start looking at really geothermal and nuclear fusion and other things that are being added. That's the midterm. And then eventually one of those, maybe nuclear fusion, will be the end, the one that's providing all of it because it's inexpensive enough to provide a huge amount of energy that we need.
And good to see the adaptability of the people around nuclear because like after the incident happened in Japan, everybody was moving away from nuclear. But good to see people are still talking about this technology. One thing I will like to ask you. So we just talked about the technology, but how do you add the layer of AI and how is going to help in this transition or transformation?
Yeah, so I do a lot of the consulting I do, right, is based off the technologies that I did talk about. So AI being one of the buzzwords of the past 5, 6 years, right? So AI is really interesting. So JP Morgan, I think they put out I guess like a statement a couple of like 2 years ago, a year ago, something like that, that said businesses are not seeing the value of investment in artificial intelligence. And what they didn't say is because from a technologist's perspective is that because businesses do not understand how to deploy AI effectively.
Yes. And that's the biggest challenge. Like ROI on that technology still is not easy to find out.
Yes. And that's because there's not enough people internally in most companies, right, who can understand this. Even the hyperscalers are having issues of how do we, and OpenAI are having issues of how do we monetize this? And where I see the future of this going, and I mentioned this in my keynote a couple weeks ago, is I said, really the future of AI lies in giving every employee a agent that can help them effectively do their day jobs, right? And it's versatile enough that it can do the things that a person can do or do some of those menial tasks and then be able to grow with them. So you can set agents to be able to do repetitive tasks that you do every day. That is the future of the monetization of AI in my mind, right? Of being able to give people the ability to eliminate some of the menial tasks that they are already doing, and that's the promise of AI. It's been the promise for a couple of years now, right? Is to say, how do we make things easier for people in their jobs. And then how do we then automate those processes? So we talked about, in my speech, we talked about multi-agentic AI, right? Of being able to, if you understand agents, the idea is that you create an agent that can think and do something, one of those tasks for you. In the future, you'll have people managing agents to do different tasks.
Any case study or anything that you can talk about that you might be using or you might have implemented in Siemens Energy?
Yeah. So currently I'm creating an agent for partnering. right? So inside of our organization, so it can do research, it can do elements of some of the things that we do in partnering inside of our organization, such as contractual language,
Hmm.
autofilling some contracts, right? All of this is still, you have to have someone who's reviewing it, but
Yeah.
some of those menial tasks, right? Some of those tasks that, it's just kind of, you're filling it in, filling the date in, right? Like all of those things are things that can be automated with AI. The fact is that, it's an agent that can interact with anyone inside of our business and be able to tell them, these are the companies we're working with. These are the companies that were, just researched, right? So anyone who's interested, because partnering exists across the entirety of our organization, I'm sure it's similar in
Hmm.
yours,
Hmm.
right? Is everyone wants to do partners, but they don't know where to begin. They don't know who to talk
Yes.
to. So this agent is like a chat bot on steroids, right? Is that it can do a lot more than just chat, right? But because of that,
It's very hard to find, like you and I spoke before, correct? Like I'm in sales and I'm really trying to find the use cases of those agents.
yes.
And I think finding those areas where those agents can be implemented, I think that could be the starting point.
Yeah, everybody was asking me this at the conference, right after I gave my speech, right, on my keynote, right. So, but after I gave it, it's because they said, "How do I implement AI now?" Right, and I said, "There's so many companies out there that are already deploying AI agents. Salesforce, for example, with Einstein, right? So, like that can help you and if you're in sales, right, it can help you know more about the person that you're getting ready to speak with for a sales engagement. It can remind you of all of your notes. It can pull from
Hmm.
company notes." Who,
Hmm.
how have we worked with them in the past? All of those things. So it's able to do a lot of that already, right? Close the deal if you're
Yes.
talking in a sales relationship. So there's a lot of, and I say, look, if you can't deploy it yourself, you don't have AI, you don't have really an AI budget inside your organization, start with the companies that you're already working with in your IT stack. And that there's a lot of clicks after that for in people's minds. Like, oh yeah, I could work with Salesforce or SAP or another company
Yes.
to do this.
Yes. 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 No, that makes sense. So lots of things are happening in this industry, and this industry is not boring.
Yes.
Definitely is not boring, like, because there are lots of technology. We talked about the industrial application, but these AIs, machine learnings, they are bringing new aspect to this whole discussion. So Jackson, I'm going back to your journey. Like, let's talk more about it. You had a very interesting journey till today, but if you have given a chance to make any changes, what those would be?
Well, I would have pushed for more for coding earlier, right, in my career, right. I think a lot of people are a little afraid of technology, right, especially like learning to code or something like that. But in the end, I mean, every coder I talk to, they do internet research, right, to find if they don't know something, they're like, yes, how do I do this code, right? They'll just do search for something, and
And
someone
now,
will have said something.
now we have a chat GPT.
Yes. Well, and now, coding is becoming less important, right? So you're seeing that a lot of coders are having issues finding jobs
Yes.
because, AI is able to do a lot of the at least entry level coding, right?
Yes.
And so that's something where I would have definitely learned earlier in my career. I would have focused more, and this is what I tell my students, I would have focused more on I consider careers kind of like relationships, right? Like, there's a series of hurdles that you have to jump to find the right spot, right? Or the right person
Yes.
in relationship mind. Focusing on your industry first, right? What industry do I want to be in? And then focusing on the role, right? What role really makes sense for me to be in? Is it sales? Is it strategy? Is it marketing, right? That's really important as well. So if you identify your industry you want to be in and you identify the role, then you can identify what company you want to be in, right? And
Definitely.
then you can make those determinations. And I tell my students, right, I say when you're looking for a new job or a new role, treat that like a job, right? And not enough people do that to then find the right fit that they want to be in.
Definitely, and definitely, you had really good points. So whatever the role you are doing, do it effectively and efficiently,
Yes.
and then you can grow from that role. Because sometimes we have ambition, and that ambition goes other way around. So you stopped
Yes.
enjoying, you are stopped giving 100% the role that you are doing today.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's
and
good to
I
have
tell this,
ambition. Yes.
yeah, when I tell a lot of Gen Alpha and Gen Z students, right, like this, I say, look, there's a lot of jumping around, right? Back in the old days, you worked in one career and one company for 30 plus years, right? That's those days are gone. But That doesn't mean that you should jump around all the time to
All the
find the right
time,
fit.
definitely. What would you learn if you jump
Yes,
all the
you
time?
won't learn anything. You won't like, accomplish projects, right? You really don't really start to accomplishing projects in a role for until like a year and a half, 2 years on, right? So if a company sees that you're jumping every year or every 2 years, that's not good, right?
No.
There's a CEO who recently said, and she started from the bottom of a company and became a CEO. Now, this isn't everybody's journey, but she said, I stayed, right? Where everybody else was leaving, I stayed and I became the CEO because I was accomplishing, 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 and then I became the CEO. So that is one way and one journey that you can focus on and do really well with.
No, that's great. So that also brings us to rapid fire round. So talk more about these things. So are you ready, Jackson?
Sure.
Let's see how ready you are.
I hope I'm ready.
Let's see. What do you enjoy in the morning, coffee or tea?
I don't drink caffeine,
Okay.
so neither.
Neither. Okay. A nickname your team gave you.
Oh, the Terminator.
Really? Why?
Because it's a long time ago, right? But it was when in my first career, I was going through different contracts and I was terminating a whole bunch that didn't make any sense.
Okay.
And so they nicknamed me the Terminator. Yeah,
Literally terminate.
the Terminator. Yeah.
First job ever.
Subway when I was nope, not Subway. That was my second job. My first job was singing at a church. I was 13 years old and I got paid to be in the choir.
Oh, man, like I don't know, like so you're a singer, you're a radio
Back in the
host.
day, I was
Okay, I didn't know about that. Okay. Work from home or office hustle? Like what do you like?
hybrid.
Hybrid.
So yeah, I prefer to work from home because I can focus on my tasks at hand. But for really important meetings and for true collaboration, you absolutely need to be in the office.
I believe that a hybrid brings a mix of both. Good because especially when you have a new team or something you want to discuss, I think office environment helps a lot.
Absolutely.
AI friend or enemy?
Friend, it could become an enemy, right? I mean, I have no doubts that many defense departments around the world are taking AI and utilizing it for nefarious, war purposes. But in the end, I think I believe in AI being able to bring a lot of the challenges that we've existed as in humanity, and to solve some of those and several of those, and to be a really effective use for humanity. It's in the end, it's not the tool that you have to blame. It's the people utilizing the tool.
I think so. Everything has good and bad. So it depends upon us. What do we want to use it?
Yeah.
Innovation in one word.
Fun.
I think so.
If you're
I
not
think so.
innovating, you're not thinking, right? Like
Yeah,
you
no,
should
right.
always be innovating in your role, even if it's like in a non-R&D role, right? You should always be innovating yourself as well as in your
Okay,
job.
let me ask you like one question. Now, when you're looking for innovation, how efficient using your internal workforce to create something new versus putting a separate team outside of your corporate culture?
You're speaking like someone who works for a large company.
And I think everybody listening to this thing, like I want to get your response on this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason startups are more effective when it comes to innovation, right? I mean, and that large companies end up purchasing a ton of startups, right? It's because there's so much red tape in large organizations for innovation. It can be challenging to innovate, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of politicking in every organization that I've consulted for or worked with, right? And so I can tell you that innovation is great, and that's why I have a startup, right? The startup that I have, I create smart devices, and it's nothing related to what I do at work, right? So they're fine with me doing it, but it's a way for me to be innovative and really think and challenge myself, right? And I can do that inside of our company as well, but it's a lot tougher to do, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of hoops you have to jump through, and
That's the story of any big corporates, correct?
yes, yes, any big corporate, that's just the way it works.
Definitely. One thing your students teach you.
Whew, patience. Seriously, I mean, one of the challenges that academics have right now is AI is being utilized to do the thinking for students. A couple of years ago when I started teaching, no one was using ChatGPT to
Yes,
write
right.
papers, right? Like that just didn't exist, at least in the mainstream. Now it's a challenge for academics to be able to say, which is why I do a lot of simulations in my classes, right? So you have to have read the material because it's not like you could pull up AI and have it while you're trying to do a simulation. So and a lot of my grading is based
Uh,
off of that, right?
yes,
And they have to
lots
do
of
a project.
static information is available online.
Yeah. Well, and so then I encourage them to use AI, right? Encourage them to utilize it for the projects, like especially data analytics and statistics. I say, look, use it to learn and then apply it towards your work, right? And to do a simulation or do an actual project, right? For your business. And so I hope that that allows students to really learn in my classes.
You made a really good point. Actually, I was listening to another podcast. They were talking about there's lots of information, but the problem with the new generation, how to use this information and implement it.
Yes. The
That's a
critical
struggle.
thinking skills in danger, right? Because people
Yes.
didn't think that. I mean, I have students who say, yeah, I use AI every day, every hour of every day, right? That I'm awake, right? Like that's great, but they're using it for like, what should I buy? Salami or pastrami, right? Like things that are not AI is not meant for, right?
Definitely use your interest, your own knowledge
Yes.
to decide on these things. That's great. One gadget you cannot live without.
Oh, my phone. Yeah, I've been to over 80 different countries, and I tell them as long as I have an internet connection in my phone, I can do and see and get anywhere, right? I think that's probably true for most generations, but
I
yeah,
think so. Yeah, okay, the phone. Okay, future in one sentence.
exciting. It's a word, right? But
Yes.
I guess let's see if I can give you one whole sentence full of technology we haven't even seen.
Oh, really? It's a lot to explore.
Oh yeah, if you ever
Lot.
heard about the singularity, right, by Ray
Yes.
Kurzweil, like that is something that he's actually moved up the date into like their late 2030s of when AI will we have AGI, right, and not only AGI but our AI that's smarter than people, and just the amount of innovation that will happen when that happens, it's going to be exciting. Hopefully your listeners are will be around during that time and they'll be able to see this amazing things that are coming out.
That's amazing. So last not the least, I know we are running out of time, but we already talked about so much about technology and everything. But I have to ask you one question. What one bias do you see that still exists in this energy industry? And how can we overcome?
Yeah, so I think our company does really well, right? I see Siemens Energy does really well in DEI initiatives, right? So DEI currently in the United States, right, has kind of some bad
Yes, yes, yes,
connotations, right?
yes, yeah.
But I think in the end, it's a good thing to push for diversity. So in our company, right? So in industrial, engineering companies, engineers have tended to be, male focused, right? And we're really pushing for diversity of thought, and in a good way, right? Not just doing diversity just for diversity. We're doing it where we want to promote it amongst people who traditionally wouldn't have been seen in these roles, but who are really effective managers, really effective people. And so I think that's one thing that is changing in the energy space, right? Is this male dominated space is
It
really
is.
becoming dominated by people who are just smart thinkers, right? And it doesn't matter what race you are, what sex you are,
Yes.
those people are going to be the ones who are going to be leading the energy future. And that's exciting time to be in, where we can look at our equality across. I think in business that we really see it, right? Is equality of thought is really appreciated, and I like that.
I can imagine like different race and the religion, like all these things bring new point of views into the discussion. So we need ever more inclusivity and diversity if you
Yes,
want to make this business successful.
absolutely.
No, that's great. So one thing I will ask you, where to learn about AI and how to implement AI into your business.
So there's a ton of online resources, right? So if you're just starting from the basics, you don't even know, let's say nothing, you don't know anything about AI. There's a ton of online resources. People talk about it. Professors, their lectures are available. If you really want to become a practitioner, then most businesses offer AI like level courses, right? Like we have a
certification
relationship
courses.
with Microsoft and they do Microsoft trainings on like OpenAI, right, and ChatGPT. So you can get those access from your company. If you have a really effective and really strong leadership inside your company, you can do external resources. You can do online classes. There's a ton of them. Coursera has some. You can do a lot of different, there's a lot of companies like Coursera, but the idea is that you can do online classes. And if you want to become the AI person of your company, you can get a degree. A lot of companies will be supportive, especially when they realize, most companies have now, that AI is the future. And if they don't have enough people internally, they're willing to train people, are willing to train people internally.
That's really good point. So listeners, as Jackson's mentioned, like if you want to develop your career in that direction, maybe talk to your manager, talk to your company. There could be some resources that can help you to grow in this dimension.
Absolutely.
So with that, we have to stop now. But before we sign off, Jackson, anything to add here?
No, this has been a great. Thank you for inviting me on. I try not to talk about myself too much in person, but it's nice to be able to do that in a podcast. But no, I think it's been a great conversation. So I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you so much for all your insights. So with that, I will sign off for today. Keep listening, Oil and Gas Breaking By show. See you next week. Have a great day. Thank you.